So my lesson for life is, if you're going to make a major change, like taking the lid off a beehive, just spend a moment understanding what is happening in the system, or else you're going to get stuck. Look, so at work, if you're going to ask your boss for a pay rise, don't ask them when they're stressed. Read the room, see what's going on, notice what else is happening. Use our superpowers, listen, observe, notice, just tune in to what is happening.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, I'm here with Philip Atkinson. He's the founder of HiveLogic.com, and more interestingly, he's a beekeeper and the author of Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from a Busy Beehive, and he's going to share with us what we can all be learning about leadership from bees today. So thanks for being here with us, Philip.
Thank you, Jason. It's good to connect and be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So beekeeping, what's the story? How did you get into it? Where does one start in beekeeping? Tell us all about it.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I'm smiling. Everyone has a bee story. It tends to go back to childhood, to do with tasting honey or bees or watching bees as a kid. And my great uncle was a beekeeper, and I was just fascinated by what he did. Fast forward 30 years. I live in the French countryside right next to the Swiss border, and I found a bee club in an old hut in the forest. And on the door, it said, "New members welcome." Now, the advert was painted on, I think it was 50 years old. I thought, well, I'm still a new member. I'm going to knock on the door. And I went in and I was hooked. It was absolutely fascinating. And I started studying as a hobby that was nothing to do with work, which I'll come and explain later. But I was hooked.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I tend to avoid weird shacks out in the woods, but it sounds like it worked. Sounds like it worked out for you. So, so tell us a little bit more about your professional background, because you mentioned beekeeping was very different than what you do from work. So tell us about what it is you do for work, what you did for work, and the contrast that beekeeping brought to it.
Yeah, thank you. And all of the life has these stories that come together, doesn't it? And that's what we're talking about today. I spent a long career working in large multinational organizations, primarily in healthcare, companies like Novartis or Roche or Sanofi in Paris. And these are big, busy, complex organizations. And I was a team leader, and my job was to lead teams. And I was fascinated by how some teams were brilliant and some teams were terrible. Same company, same officers, same buildings, same biscuits in the meeting rooms. Some teams were brilliant, some teams were an absolute car crash. And I was in some of each of those teams, and I started studying organizational change and the psychology of teamwork. And I just got fascinated by how to be a better leader at work. The beekeeping was something I was studying. I love studying. I like studying complex systems. And outside of work, at the weekends, I was studying beekeeping. And for me, they were two completely separate things. Great, I was happy. Great. And then one day, on a sunny summer's day, I was sitting outside at the bus stop outside my office, and I noticed how the building was 4 stories high with a small door at the front, and people were coming and going and greeting each other, carrying ideas and briefcases and experience. Inside, it was noisy and busy, and lots of people working and moving, and there was an amazing sweet product came out of it. In that particular case, it happened to be drugs to treat cancer, so amazing products coming out. And everyone was communicating and moving, and everyone was busy. And all of a sudden it hit me, the analogy between a beehive and a complex organizational life is a relevant one. And I started telling beekeeping stories at work to help introduce difficult concepts. It might have been about communication or conflict or change management. And I started using the beekeeping metaphor to help have better conversations at work. And people were interested, and it worked, and it's carried on. And fast forward, you mentioned the book. Fast forward, the book Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from a Busy Beehive has come to life. And that's what we're here today.
Yeah, the book is really fascinating. One of the things I really love about the book is it's not just your perspective on this. It sounds like you had one day where you had a real see the Matrix moment as you walked up to the building. But it's not just your perspective on it. One of the great things about the book is you put in your perspectives and then you let an expert in the field respond with their perspective on what you've written. And every chapter is what you had to say about it and then an expert's response to it.
Yeah, this was like a kind of a light bulb moment. I wrote one chapter and I thought, hang on. Why is anyone interested in my one chapter? That I don't work by myself. I work in collaboration with colleagues or experts or with team leaders. Everything I do is collaboration. So I wrote the first chapter and thought, well, what am I going to do with this? So I sent it to an expert in the field. Chapter 1 is all about organizational design and new ways of working. And I sent it to an expert in the field and said, I'd love to hear your response. And the author for that chapter, the guest writer, is called Tim Ershinger, who's a partner at EY. And he said, Philip, I don't agree. And I thought, brilliant, because now we can have a dialogue about different perspectives. And that's what the book is not just me. The book is me, 12 chapters and 12 guest writers. So it's actually a dialogue between all of us. And I really think that's quite unique in the publishing world. And it's made it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I've never seen that outside of like professional journals and not ever in the same journal where someone writes a journal article or publication and then someone responds to it with another one later on. I think it's really great. I'd love to see more books do this. This is something we had to do in the Air Force. Whenever we were pitching an idea and we were coordinating that around and bringing it to the decision maker, we always had to, on the very cover sheet, which is called a staff summary sheet, which no one cares about. But on the staff summary sheet, we had to include a section of views of others in there so the decision maker knew what the views of others were. And I think this is a really great way to write a book, to incorporate the views of others, good, bad, or indifferent, of what we've said, of the assertions we've made.
Yeah, it's good practice and it's fun, and life should be a dialogue. It's, what we talk about should be thought-provoking and it should provoke thinking, and that's what we've done and we've captured. So thank you. It's an interesting twist to the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Dialogue and communication is so important in humans, and it turns out it's actually really important to bees, much more so than I ever understood with bees, how important communication is. So let's talk about how bees communicate and then what we all can learn from communicating with our teams from the bees are.
Yeah, first of all, bees, there's 100,000, in the heat of the summer, there might be 50 to 80,000 bees all working in harmony with a single purpose. And the single purpose is to create the honey and to look after the queen. Now, when bees actually communicate, they don't have voices, but bees communicate very, very clearly by a thing called a waggle dance. So let me explain. If a bee goes out and finds an amazing source of pollen, let's say an apple tree in March in full blossom, thousands of white flowers, the bee comes back to the hive and it needs to tell the hive whereabouts the source of pollen is and how far. And actually they do a dance in a figure of 8, that's the waggle dance, and the central line of the figure of 8 describes to all of the bees exactly the angle relative to the sun. So you know how the direction. And then you need to know the distance, or the approximate relative distance, and how strongly the bee communicates, how strongly and vigorously it does the dance, indicates how far away it is. In addition, the bees come back covered in the pollen. So they're kind of bringing back samples. So they dance the direction, they dance with the passion of how far it is, and then they're covered in the pollen, and they repeat that and they repeat it, and then bees go and follow, and they come back and repeat the same dance, and then more bees go, and eventually one apple tree with 1 million flowers will all be fertilized by the same bees from the same hive. Now, the guy who worked out about this communication model got a Nobel Prize. This was a very big scientific advance. What's not talked about is the bees do that in the dark, in the tiny crowded space inside a hive. Now, I use this metaphor when talking about communication at work. At work, we need to be passionate, we need to be clear, we need to be consistent. We also need to repeat our messages. And sometimes, looking at my inbox, there are so many messages. It's like being in the dark. There are so many messages. And if you need to communicate something, you need to communicate it with consistency and with clarity and with passion. Don't just assume if you've sent one email, it's done. If you have 50,000 people in an organization, communication is an art. And that's what I want to encourage people to do, is to think more about how they are communicating and to making sure it's message received.
Well, and one of the things that I find fascinating about this is, much like our own lives, there's a lot of noise, right? So the bee comes back to the hive, the scout bee, and says, "Hey, I know where a great tree is." But there are other bees coming and going. There are other bees doing their own dances at the same time. There are other bees doing other things in the hive, and they're all kind of packed together. So that one bee has to overcome a lot of noise.
That's right. Yes, and there's a lot of noise in the hive, and actually the bees do two things. First of all, they tell their message with clarity and with passion. And the other bees notice. Let's say a bee has found from bee experience, a second-rate source of pollen. It comes back and it communicates it with not as much energy because from experience as the main source. So the bees start to notice, and then the bees have a second opinion. So the bees follow. Some bees might follow bee A, and some might follow the second bee, BB. But when they come back, the message is multiplied. And also that's a good lesson for communication in an organization. You need to have people that can communicate messages and repeat them. And that's important. People need to be able to take a message and to translate it into their own language to help spread a message. And that's what the bees do.
Yeah, that's something that's easy for us to forget as humans, is that just because we transmitted a message doesn't mean anybody understood it, and it doesn't mean anyone can carry that message further. So something else, there's so much I didn't know about bees until I read this book. But something else I didn't know about bees is that they train and mentor each other. So tell us about the career path of a bee and how they progress along it by being trained and mentored by the other bees.
Yeah, this blew my mind when I first learned about it. Traditionally we think of bees out flying and pollinating flowers. That's the last job they do, and it's only for the last 3 to 4 days of their life. Now, in the height of summer, a bee will live for approximately 34 days, and it will only fly for the last few days of its life. Before then, when a bee is first hatched, it comes out of its cell and it stretches its wings and it gets met by some nurse bees who train the bees to be nurses. And that's the first job. And it's a very specialist job, and they look after the cells and look after the eggs and look after the larvae, and that's one specific job. And they do that job 24/7 for 3 to 4 days. And then it gets interesting. They stop that, and they start training the new eggs that have just hatched to do the nursing job. So they do the job, then they mentor and train the next bees to do that same job. So far, they are functional experts of one skill. But then they become trained in the next job, which is completely different, which is to be a builder. And building, where they secrete the wax glands to make those beautiful, perfect hexagonal cells, that's a completely different speciality. So the nurses, they become builders, and then they carry on. They become in charge of air conditioning and cleaning and security and feeding the queen. And then eventually they work to the front of the hive, and their penultimate job is to receive the bees coming in. So that's the first time they're exposed to the outside world, and then their last job is to fly. And that means that every bee has learnt every skill needed in a hive. There's a great evolutionary advantage. Let's say a hive gets knocked over by a bear. The whole colony needs rebuilding, and all of the bees know how to rebuild, and they all rebuild. It's like an emergency, agile response to a stimulus. The lesson we take for career planning in work actually is, we are not bees, and the book doesn't say let's pretend to be bees. But the lesson we take from this is that actually we need to specialise and go deep into what we're working on, and we need to keep learning other skills. We need to keep evolving and keep learning and keep trying different things. For example, if you work in sales, go and work in marketing. Or if you work in marketing, go and work in customer relations. Now, you might not like it, and that's fine. Stop. Go back to what you love. But at least you've understood more of the business. You can be a better salesperson by having worked in marketing or customer relations. But, keep moving, keep thinking, keep learning, keep evolving, keep adding value and keep being relevant. That's what we advocate for.
Yeah, and I know that's not always viewed as how to do things in corporate. In the military, we did that a lot. We did what was called career broadening. We would lend people out. People would go to do something they were interested in and that was kind of part of our culture in the military to get people as many different skills and as much exposure as they could, at least in the US Air Force it was. But I understand corporate, that's not how things get viewed, and a lot of managers, a lot of frontline leaders are reluctant to let someone go for a little while because of the impact it would have on their individual team.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, the military has some brilliant, HR principles. I think they really do in terms of learning and training development. It's second to none. And what you just said in corporate world, a leader might be reluctant to let someone go. Now, already that means it's about the leader. It's not about the team member. And also it's about the leader, not the benefit of the organization. Surely, if you have good talent, let them move, let them learn, let them grow, let them build their own relationships, their own experience. Surely that's a good thing. And the work we do consulting with clients is all about new ways of working, and that's an important one. Allow people to be brilliant, find their path. That's important.
Yeah, I love that. Allow people to be brilliant. I really, really love that. Another thing I learned out of the book, bee swarms aren't what we all think they are. We see a swarm of bees and we think we're about to be attacked. We think that's not what a bee swarm really is. So tell us what bees are doing when they do swarm, and then how do they go through that decision-making process to begin that and move as a swarm?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. This is fascinating. First of all, a bee swarm is the way for a beehive to reproduce. So if you have one beehive and it actually decides to split into two, one stays where it is and half forms a swarm and goes to a new hive. So that goes from one hive to making two hives. So a swarm is really a way of a colony of bees reproducing. That's simply what they do. They're looking for when you see a bee swarm, they're looking for a new home, or they're going to a new home they've found. The second thing is when they are swarming, if you've ever seen a bee swarm, you might see them coming across your garden, and it's typically in May in Western Europe. In fact, early May, June is when swarming happens. That's the season. First of all, it's noisy. I mean, it sounds like a jet engine. It's an incredible noise, and it's this mass. It could be 50,000 bees all flying together like in a tight ball. It's terrifying. But the truth is, they've actually eaten all of the honey to take it with them. And it's a bit like having a big meal. They are full of honey, and actually they're a bit lethargic. And the noise they make is trying to get their heavy bodies off the ground to fly. They're not going to sting you. In fact, you can pick up a bee swarm with your hands with a bit of sensitivity we'll talk about, but they won't sting you. They've got a job to do and they're very focused. But you asked the question, how do they decide where they're going? And again, it's a bit like the waggle dancing. At work, we talk about decisions. Not all decisions are equal. Some decisions are really simple. Let's take a simple decision. It could be taken by one person. Some decisions require a lot more thought. Some decisions require a whole strategic process of analysis. Great, but not all decisions are the same. So our first plea is to help organizations and teams think more about how they take decisions. A bee swarm is a life or death decision. So it's an important one. If the bees, when they decide to split and go to a new home, they need to find the new home first. And a bit like the waggle dance and the apple pollen, actually scouts bees go looking for different home sites, and then they come back, and there might be 6 different bees advertising 6 different places. And it's the same process as the waggle dance. Each of them come back and make a pitch. And really, depending on how excited they are and how far it is and what they say, then bees make a second decision. So some bees then go and do some more fact finding. And then they come back. And that through that process, not many, it might be 100 bees are collecting data and feeding it back. And eventually 50,000 bees all support one decision. So they debate, they argue, they disagree, they get a second opinion, then they take a decision, and then with full consensus, 50,000 bees all agree to go to the same place. Bees have had 10 million years to evolve to do this, and they do it very well. Now, how many organisations align behind a big decision and fully support something? There's a lot to learn from the bees.
Absolutely. And you talked about how what the bees show us an example of decision making by consensus. So for humans, what's the difference between decision by consensus and decision by consent, and how does that apply on our teams?
Yeah, we work with lots of leadership teams, and often let's say there's 10 people in a leadership team meeting. We often find that whatever the decision is, 10 people talk about it. And that's just not very, I'm being a bit flippant. If we're trying to decide where to go for the Christmas party, 10 people have an opinion and 10 people talk about it. And it's just not an efficient use of time. So decision making by consent is where we say, I trust you to take a decision on our behalf. And actually what works really well is to delegate 2 people to take a decision together on behalf of the team. So where you go for the Christmas party, I have an opinion, but I'm not going to add any value to 10 people discussing it. Why don't I say, stop, I trust 2 people, go away, make a proposal, take a decision, I trust you, it's consent, get on with it. And you can do that with lots of things at work, and it happens a lot quicker and a lot more effectively. And then when you need decision by consensus or other work models, you have more time for the big decisions. And I just wish the many teams we work with, I wish they applied that better thinking to a decision-making process.
Yeah, I'm very much the guy who all I care about is you tell me where and when to show up for the party, and I will be there. I don't need to be involved in the planning. I don't need to be involved in the setup. I don't need to be involved in picking what the theme is. Just tell me where and when to be there, and in some cases what I'm supposed to wear, and I will be there.
And Jason, there's a great example where you are demonstrating trust. You trust someone else to take a decision. The choice of Christmas party venue is not such a big deal, but we need to have more trust. If we're going to hire good people, let's trust them to be good and trust them to have the right intent. And let's delegate more. Really, let's push power down the line into the teams that know best. I
agree. What's a good example of something that we should be doing decision by consensus? Because a lot of what we can do can be decision by consent if we've built up trust with our teams. What's a good example of something that we would want to do as decision by consensus?
I've been working today with an organization that are doing a significant transformation, and they're changing the way people's bonuses are paid because anyway, it's a transformation and it's a new way of working, but the old bonus system supports the old way of working. So this is a big deal. Now, what I've been coaching the team on is not necessarily consensus, but it's a big decision, and let's hear from everybody what they think. So actually, the coaching process has been to make sure everyone in the meeting is there because they can contribute, and let's hear from everybody. And let's give everyone space to share their thoughts, their concerns, their hopes, their fears. Let's hear from everybody in the room. It's not just the HR person, and it's not just the person in charge who often steamroller these discussions. Let's hear from everybody. And when we've heard from everybody, let's take a decision. Some people might not agree, so it's not consensus in this case, but at least we've heard from everybody. And that's really important. That is mature leadership. And, if you have a concern, voice it. There is no point hiring good people and then not listening to them. So that's important. Let's spend more time on the big important topics, and let's delegate the rest.
Yeah, I think it's so important for those big things to make sure people get a chance to say something and to let people know that they've been heard. It doesn't mean we're going to follow what they said. It doesn't mean we're going to agree. It doesn't mean they're going to agree with what we do. But at least we've taken the time to hear what they have to say, and they know that we've heard. They know that we've listened, not just heard.
Yeah, and it comes back to trust and psychological safety, and people might have concerns. Great. Let's hear your concerns. If you are concerned about it, and I value your opinion, let me hear and understand what it is you're concerned about. And then it's our job as a leadership team to work through and address those concerns. What doesn't work is when you get a very strong leader pushing through and everyone just says yes, or doesn't speak up, or doesn't say anything, and then they complain afterwards. That's not leadership.
Yeah. Especially in a military environment, there's a time and a place for that, like rebuilding a unit that's been failing. But those are edge cases. I mean, typically in a corporate work environment, that is way out in the exceptions, in the anomaly case, than it is from day-to-day corporate operations. So, all right, let's take a break from the bees and the leadership. Let's play a game. Are you up for a game?
I love a game, Jason. Yes, please.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Don't be fooled by the word rapid. You don't have to give us one-word answers. You don't have to rush. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like to so we can get to know Philip a little better, okay? All right, you ready?
Bring it on. Bring it on.
All right. Philip Atkinson, rapid response round. Your time begins now. A podcast recommendation.
I've been listening a lot recently to a brilliant podcast called The Innovation Show. And the presenter is a guy called Aidan McCullen from Ireland. He used to be a professional rugby player. But he's very smart. And he's a very smart guy, and he works in the corporate world. And I really recommend people listen to this. It's a good show. He has some great guests. Aidan McCullen and the Innovation Show.
I don't know that one, and I can't wait to check it out. I can't wait to hear what a professional poker player has to say about innovation. And being here in Las Vegas, I actually know some professional poker players or professional gamblers who are now investors in our tech community, and I've learned so many things about decision making and thinking through problems from them that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. What is a practice you'd like to see more people embrace?
Well, that's actually the big theme from the book, Be Wise. It's about thinking more. Life is not about doing more or doing the same stuff quicker and smarter and faster. My whole hypothesis or plea to the world, slow down and think a little bit harder about the important things. So my practice people should embrace better quality thinking.
I love that. And everyone should go read this book. We'll talk about it more. But this book is great because you're not asking people to make huge changes in their life to do better quality thinking. The book is a lot of little things we can do, like just going a little slower to improve the quality of our thinking, to improve our outcomes. Who is someone we should all be paying attention to?
Well, here's a link to another great book. There's a great book called The Coaching Habit, and the subtitle is, I've just given my last copy away today. The subtitle is Say Less Say Less and Ask More and Change the Way You Lead Forever. And the author is Michael Bungay Stanier. He happens to be from Melbourne in Australia, but he's big on the global coaching circuit. He's funny, he's brilliant, he's sassy. I really pay attention to Michael Bungay Stanier. He's great.
Yeah, that's a fantastic book. I have read that. And if you're having trouble getting a copy somewhere, you should be able to get it digitally from your local library. That's where I got it, from our local library in a digital format. So,
oh, good! It is a great book, and there's a new edition coming out. But he has a lot to say, and he's funny and smart, and I really appreciate how he says it.
Yeah, it's a great book. What is either your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
It's probably the same. It's a classic. Queen, Can't Stop Me Now is a great song.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you play music for the bees, or when you're working with the bees, or is that like something you don't do?
No. There's a whole saying about you must talk to the bees. Actually, there is a whole thing about, if there's some important news, or there's been a birth or a death in the family, that you should go and tell the bees. And actually, talking to bees means you relax as a beekeeper, and also you'll relax, you breathe better, you slow down. By talking, you relax. And singing, when you sing to bees, you relax, and the bees notice that you're less stressed. So, yep, singing, talking, chatting to the bees is a good thing.
Okay. Do the bees like Queen?
Queen bee might, yes.
Okay. Who or what is the biggest influence in your life?
I'm blessed with 4 children. My 16-year-old son is the person who's currently teaching me the most. And for anyone else who's got a 16-year-old son, I think he spends a lot of time gaming. And it's I'm an old man and he's my 16-year-old teenager. But in actual fact, the more that I ask more questions and say less and listen and pay attention, I'm learning so much from him. It's a real revelation at the moment. Teenagers do have a lot to say. You just need to create the right environment to listen to them.
Absolutely. So besides The Coaching Habit and Be Wise, of course, what's a book everyone should read?
It's on this. Here we are. This is a book, another book I love. I'm just going to hold it up for those on video. It's called Time to Think, and it's by an American lady called Nancy Klein. Time to Think. The subtitle is Listening to Ignite the Human Mind. And actually, this book is quoted a lot in my book, and we've talked about a lot of the themes today. It's creating the right thinking environment to allow people to be brilliant at work, to be brilliant in meetings, to be brilliant as individuals. Let's make time to think, to listen to them.
Yeah, that's a great book. I've read that one too. Also available online at your local public library. So check that out.
Jason, this has not been rehearsed, so we have a good hit rate together so far. I'm pleased that across the miles that we're aligned on some good reading.
Yeah, no, I love that. A lot of these questions are for me to find out about new books to read or new podcasts to listen to or new things to try. But it's nice that we've read some of the same books. So, what is your favorite springtime recreational activity?
Well, I think it has to be beekeeping. Springtime is a magical time in a beehive. They grow so quickly. The queen lays 1,000 eggs a day, and that means there's 1,000 eggs hatching a day. And there's the pollen, and the trees come into blossom, and then the wildflowers come into blossom. It's a fascinating time, and the smell, and the smell, the colour, the noise, the feeling, the honey. A springtime recreational activity has to be beekeeping.
All right. Now, I know it's hard to leave the bees behind, but what is your dream vacation spot?
I do leave the bees behind. I love being by water. I live right on the border with Switzerland, And south of Geneva, there's a lake called Lake Annecy, and it's a beautiful lake surrounded by mountains. And that is a special place that I try and go to every year. It's just one of many of nature's beautiful places.
That sounds great. I'll have to check it out sometime. What is a trend you're excited about?
I'm going to say my own trend from the book, which is thinking better. I'm really working hard to encourage people at work to stop doing the same thing they did last year but quicker, or, forecasting and just repeating the same things. No. Think harder about solving bigger problems. Really understand what your customers need, understand the pain points, understand about the environment and our impact and about our supply chains. So actually thinking harder is a trend I'm excited about.
I love that. Last one. Your favorite sports team or player?
I think you're familiar with the Tour de France, the cycle. It's a cycle road racing competition. A lot of things attract me to it. First of all, it takes place over a whole month in France, so you can miss a day, you can miss an afternoon, and you can still keep up. But it's amazing teamwork. So to get a sprinter to a finish line at the end of a 200-mile race takes a team of 7 other people. They look after them, they feed them, they push them, they protect them. It's the most amazing team race, full of brilliant individuals. And it's fascinating to understand the team dynamics. It's amazing. I love it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about Tour de France, but that's really interesting. Next time that comes around, I'm going to have to pay a little more attention.
Yeah, there's 150 riders in a peloton, and they work together. They work together as a whole unit, like a beehive does, and then they race and they compete with each other, and then the individual teams are all fighting with each other teams, and then within a team you get competitive issues within a team, and then they need to have a succession plan and agree who's going to win and support. It's fascinating level of complexity. It's great.
That's exciting. Well, thanks for playing our game. It's nice to get to know you a little bit the way the other questions might not get us there. To go back to the many things I did not know about bees before I read your book, it turns out it's actually very noticeable when there's something wrong with a hive and when the hive, isn't working right together. Tell us about that, and then what are those parallels to our own teams?
Yeah, so like humans, bees are not always happy. So, for example, on a beautiful summer's day, with a lovely blue sky, if I, as a beekeeper, if I approach a beehive, I can see a lovely blue sky. The bees might know that a storm is coming. You know how you get thunderstorms in the summer. Well,
yes, it turns out very, very sensitive to static electricity. Another thing I learned reading the book.
Yeah, so bees actually can sense the change in atmospheric pressure. So the bees know when a storm is coming before we can see a storm coming. So if I'm working with my bees on a hot summer's day, if I just wade in, take the lid off and put my hands inside, no. Slow down and just spend a moment noticing what I notice. And I have 5 senses. Let me use them all. The first is smell. I can smell if the bees are happy, because if they're happy, they're making honey and I can smell the sugar. If the bees are stressed, they stop making honey and they make it's like a protein glue called propolis. It's really bitter, and it's used if a storm is coming to insulate the inside of the hive and glue it together. Well, let me just notice that. And if the bees are stressed, don't take the lid off. It's simple. A second thing, let me use my eyes. The bees at the front of the hive, if they're moving in a fluid fashion, they're happy. If the bees are stressed, it's a very, very staccato, anxious movement. There's a clue. Don't take the lid off. You can also hear if the bees are happy or not. If they're happy, they make a lovely hum, which is actually a B-flat noise. If the bees are stressed, it goes up almost a whole octave, and you can hear the bees are stressed. So my lesson for life is, if you're going to make a major change, like taking the lid off a beehive, just spend a moment understanding what is happening in the system, or else you're going to get stung. Look, so at work, if you're going to ask your boss for a pay rise, don't ask them when they're stressed. Read the room, see what's going on, notice what else is happening. Use our superpowers, listen, observe, notice, just tune in to what is happening. And it's just the same at a large organisational level. Tune in to what is being said and what is not being said. Tune in to what the responses are. Tune in to the right timings for things. And then you have a better chance of being successful and not being stung.
Yeah, and I think it's such great advice to use all of your senses. That's something they taught us when we were flying the airplane. When we were learning to fly the airplane, is you've got to use all your senses. It's not just enough to use your eyes. Use your ears. Listen to what the engine is telling you with the sound of the engine, right? So what do you smell? What do you feel with the vibrations, right? Taste usually doesn't come into the equation, but I suppose if you're tasting something, that tells you something as well. So, but it's such good advice to use all 5 of your senses, especially to notice the bigger picture motion of everybody in the organization, and not just watching how each individual is moving.
And that's interesting. We also have a 6th sense. We have a feeling, we have a gut feeling. Well, actually notice it. If you feel uncomfortable with something, we might not understand the science of this yet, but it's telling you something. What is it? What is your 6th sense telling you? Well, tune into it and listen and feel and notice and be curious and ask questions. There's so much more we can do to be better leaders.
Yeah, listen to those senses. They're giving you lots of information, so pay attention. Now, in the book, you talk about pollination as a metaphor for creativity and innovation. So can you tell us more about that?
Yes, and it's to do with the environment and sustainability as well. We can't all rely on the same sources of anything. Hang on, let me be clear. I'm not sure what you call it in America. When you get those huge yellow flowers of crops, enormous, massive acres of fields, we call it rapeseed oil in the UK, or colza.
I think those are sunflowers here.
No, not sunflowers, but okay, let's say sunflowers. Let's say you get an enormous field of sunflowers. It's great for the bees. But if the sunflowers have a bad year or a bad harvest, the food's gone. So really, we encourage for bees and diversity to have lots of different sources of pollen. And that's why it's important to have wildflowers, and it's important to have natural trees, and it's important to have different types of grasses. And it's important not to cut the lawn too short so that the grass can flower as well. That gives diversity, it gives different sources of pollen, everyone's happy. And it's the same at work. We're not, to be creative, we actually need to source ideas from different places, from competitors, from other products, from different industries. Let's be creative where we get our ideas from, and then let's discuss it, and let's share ideas, and let's make connections. And that's where good innovation comes from, and that's where good customer value is born.
Yep, diversify those portfolios. It's more than just about money, right? Diversify that portfolio of ideas.
Absolutely.
So bees hatch and they come out and they're put to work right away, and they kind of all go, most of them, with the exception of the queen, I think, all go through the same career progression, regardless of where they started and who their first boss was and all of that kind of thing. But what has beekeeping taught you about hiring someone to be on your team and helping emerging leaders grow?
I'm going to bring it back to diversity. We're all different. I don't even want to get into labels of, neurodiversity. We're just all, let's acknowledge we're all different. And as a leader, it's important to give people the space to be brilliant, and then help them grow. Invest in training, invest in development, or even if you have a star performer, let them go and explore a different part of the business. Let them explore a different way of working. Let them learn and grow. So, leadership is also like being a parent. We need to trust our children and let them grow and let them evolve and let them find what they're passionate about. It's really a big process. It's not about you as the adult, and it's not about you as the leader. It's hire brilliant people and then give them the space to be brilliant. I think leadership really is about creating the right environment for success as well. It's about taking away roadblocks. It's about creating opportunities. It's providing support, trusting in people. And that requires a lot of thought, and it's a selfless act. If your star performer leaves, that might not, the fear is it doesn't look good on you. But if you're supporting those people to grow and develop, in turn, it helps hiring more new people, more good people. And it has to be a generative growth process. It's a big step, but it's fundamental to the future success of companies.
Now, one of the most important things for humans, especially in the workplace, because we hear this in survey after survey, is finding purpose and meaning in our work and our life. What can bees teach us about finding purpose and meaning?
I think over 10 million years, bees have evolved to be brilliant at making honey and supporting the queen and pollinating trees. 65% of our food depends on being pollinated by bees. That's a really important purpose. They're doing well at this stuff. For us humans, we've been on the planet a lot less time, a lot shorter time, and at work, with our own humble lives, we need to work hard to find out what we're good at. And that means being curious, meeting different people, being in diverse environments, asking questions. Ask all of your friends, what do you do, what do you love, what don't you love, what can I come and learn? It's life should be a learning, questioning, growing, curious, fun ride. Don't just take one path and get stuck in it. Keep thinking and keep moving and keep growing and keep learning.
That's great. We've talked about the book quite a bit, but is there anything else you want to share with us about the book or the experience of writing the book?
Yeah, thank you. Look, the book it's a fun project, but it's 12 chapters of meaningful steps people can take, and you can learn about the bees. But the thing I'm most proud of is all of the proceeds go to a very dear charity called beesfordevelopment.org. And they support families in developing countries to have a bee business, to perhaps make money from honey or pollination or making wax candles, which in turn is invested to support their children's education. It's a lovely charity. 100%, not just the profits, but 100% of the sales go straight to the charity. So if anyone is curious to support the charity, to learn about the bees, to learn about leadership, it's all for a good cause.
Yeah, and we'll link all that up in the episode description here so people can find that. So what's coming up for you in the next few months? I mean, I'm sure more beekeeping, but what else?
You might have found today I'm passionate about these leadership topics. I do a lot of keynote talks, so I do travel around a lot of the world doing keynote talks about bees and sustainability and lessons about life and lessons about leadership. I have to preach what I say. I invest in a lot of training. I'm going on a Nancy Klein Time to Think retreat next week because I need to demonstrate what I talk about. So I'm very excited to be constantly learning, investing in myself so that I can help my clients better.
That's great. I like the follow through. I like the practice what you preach and set the example for what you want to see. I love that. So for everyone watching or listening right now, what's one lesson from the bees we can start applying in our lives today?
This is it's not controversial, but I'm not pretending we should be like the bees. So Mike, here we are. There's a phrase, being as busy as a bee. And I would like people not to be as busy as a bee. And at work, what that means is, if often you can hear it in any coffee conversation. Someone says, "How are you?" And the answer is automatic. The answer is, "I'm busy." And actually, that's not good. Being busy doing what you've always done is not the right approach. I would love people to celebrate saying, "I'm good, thanks. I've spent all morning thinking about a customer problem and I haven't quite got it right, but I'd love your input. What do you think?" That would be an absolute revelation. Instead of people saying, "I'm busy," I'm thinking about a problem. I'm working through a customer problem. I'm working through a new product. I'm working through innovation. I'm working on, I want to hire someone. I want to attract them to the organization. I really want people to celebrate stopping and pausing and thinking better about what we need to do. That's my plea to the world.
I'm glad that was what you chose, because that is a pretty significant message in the book that we hadn't gotten to yet. So I'm glad that was the one you chose for what can we learn from the bees and start doing today, is to slow ourselves down and to not be so focused on being busy, but be focused on doing what we need to do to get good outcomes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been great. I want to thank you for joining us today, Philip. Where can everyone find you so they can also thank you for joining us?
Great. Thank you. I think if you Google Be Wise, Philip Atkinson, you can find me. But we have a website, which is bewisebook.com. That's one word, bewisebook.com. The Be Wise book, I'm just going to hold it up for when you're on screen. A Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from a Busy Beehive, is available on Amazon and anywhere where you buy books. And then my organization is Bee Related. My organization, my consulting firm, is called Hive Logic. That's Hive, as in a beehive, -logic.com. And we support clients all around the world to think better and be better.
Yeah, and we will put all those links in the notes. Go get the book. Everybody go get the book. Read the book. It's great. I read it over the past couple days. Found it incredibly fascinating about the bees and incredibly fascinating about the lessons we can learn from them. Everyone go read the book. So, but like I said, we'll link all that stuff up in the notes. You guys can go connect with Philip. Thank him for joining us today. And I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. And since I'm asking you for favors, if you're on a podcast platform and you can leave a review, if you'd leave us a 5-star review, that would go a long way towards helping us build our audience so we can get more great conversations like the one we just had with Philip out to more people who can use it. So a lot more interviews coming your way. Go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.